Lt Gen KJS Dhillon, former 15 Corps commander. Group Captain Ajay Ahlawat is a veteran fighter pilot and a commentator on defense issues. Welcome to the both of you. General Dhillon, if I could quickly come to you first. You've looked at all the claim wars that have broken out following Operation Sindoor. You've also seen what the Indian Air Force Chief said categorically on the record in public in a speech just a few days ago in Bengaluru on the number of aircraft that the Indian Air Force has managed to knock out during Operation Sindoor. And now very tellingly, and you've seen this before, you've observed this during Balakot as well, the alacrity with which the US government was, furnishing information to any journalist who was looking to say that sab kuch badhiya hai, all F-16s are fine, all our aircraft are fine. They were briefing journalists about that. This time when Vishnu reached out, they've said, please ask the Pakistanis. We have no information to share with you. What do you think, General Dhillon?
Good evening, Shiv, and good evening to Vishnu and Group Captain Ahlawat and your viewers. First of all, I must compliment NDTV for an excellent follow-up of this story. And having got it out of the US government that go and ask Pakistan, that's the admission enough. Now, coming back to your question, in 2019, during Balakot, when Wing Commander Abhinandan, when he shot down an F-16, flying his MiG-21, a vintage Soviet Union origin aircraft. It was too embarrassing for the United States to accept that a MiG-21, a vintage aircraft, has been brought down by a F-16 vintage has been brought down by a vintage MiG-21. So they, I think, as a policy came out and said, okay, all is okay and hunky-dory. Now here, in Operation Sindoor, after the Air Chief specifically mentioned F-16 having been hit on ground or in air, now it must have been too much for the US also to, keep telling lies and keep protecting their allies or keep protecting Pakistan every time. And they would have said, to hell with you. Now we can't be telling lies. So this time they specifically told Vishnu, okay, please go and ask Pakistan government. Mm-hmm. And now as the images which were officially released by Indian Air Force and Air Chief himself briefed on this are very specific and very clear. And so is the answer or the deductions. So I think this time they could not tell a lie anymore because the transparency overall in the world has increased. Yeah. You know that in 2019 vis-a-vis 2015, the Google Maps, the Google Earth, and otherwise also interception transmission. So they probably felt if they tell a lie this time also, they may be caught. So they deflected the question to Pakistan government. That is how I look at it.
Group Captain Ahlawat, and Vishnu, feel free to jump in as well with any more questions. But Group Captain Ahlawat, how do you read this? This is a template kind of thing, right? This is information. It's of a sensitive nature, and this goes to the very heart of geopolitical sensitivities. As Vishnu correctly pointed out, the US has always been very, very sensitive about the reputation of its own armaments in other countries. And like General Dhillon said, they had a different response in 2019. This time they're saying, Nahi Baba, you please ask the Pakistanis.
Good evening, Shiv, and please allow me a little bit of latitude to stray from the exact question. First of all, General Dhillon, sir, Abhinandan was flying MiG-21 Bison, something that I have also flown for more than 1,000 hours. The Bison drivers would not like to call it vintage. It is one of the newer versions of MiG. Be that as it may, in my limited opinion, we're missing the wood for the trees. And this discussion, very interesting, is kind of, we are walking into narrative ambush. Our neighbors, not so friendly neighbors, have made this entire conflict about air-to-air kills, 6-0 and all that nonsense. This 100 hours operation was much more than just about air-to-air kills. We called off their nuclear bluff. We created space for punitive military action under the nuclear overhang. We demonstrated our ability to hit targets, very well-defended targets, across the length and the breadth of the Pakistan at will. We demonstrated our ability to hit terror targets in a calibrated and proportional manner, avoiding all kind of collateral damage. Now, unfortunately, the thing that captured the media space was the air-to-air kills. And that balloon has also been deflated by the chief by putting it out there that we got at least 6 of yours. So in that sense, we got even in the aeroplane scores and achieved much more in the strategic and the operational domain.
Group Captain, I would suggest that what we are presenting today actually adds to what the Chief says. Because if there was a denial from the United States, as there was in 2019, I hate to use the word narrative, I will just for this one moment, then the narrative would have shifted completely and questions would have been asked of the credibility of the statements made by the Indian Air Force Chief. The fact that you've got the United States now actually saying that no, go and ask Pakistan, to me appears to be some sort of a confirmation of something having happened in Pakistan for a couple of reasons. Number one, they are on the ground 24/7 monitoring Pakistan's F-16s. They can give a yes-no answer immediately. In 2019, they did provide journalists with that answer. They said that it did not happen. And if we now actually look at what the Indian Air Force Chief has said, where he spoke about Jacobabad, then let's have those satellite images up on the screen one more time. The Indian Air Force Chief's remarks, and this was the really important part, and I'm just going to play this out for a moment full screen. This is absolutely critical because the Air Force Chief referred to Jacobabad. He referred to this F-16 hangar. He said that the F-16s over here were being maintained, and therefore, as you can see, it's been completely destroyed. This is an F-16 hangar, has been confirmed by the Chief. This is something that US contractors would have been aware of. The fact of the matter is, the pictures clearly indicate, forget about damage, that's the word that the Chief used. Nothing would have survived inside in terms of a metallic structure. It would have been destroyed. Therefore, my humble submission is that this particular statement of the Americans is a loaded statement. It's not a simple statement, oh, go to the Americans, just fob off Vishnu because he's been asking these questions repeatedly. In fact, it's a statement which indicates a certain reality, and that reality is precisely what the Air Chief has had to say. That's my submission, sir. Group Captain.
We do appreciate you diving deep into this matter and pulling out evidence for us. But as far as I am concerned, the veteran community is concerned, and the larger populace of our country is concerned, when the Chief said they got them, we believe they got them. Fine, more evidence is always welcome. Once again, my narrow point is not that what you're doing is not good. It's excellent work. Let me quote an example. In 1973 Yom Kippur War, Israel lost 40 aircraft in the first 12 hours. The number rose to 51 in the first 3 days. Can the Syrians, the Egyptians make it about, see, we got so many of you, thus we won the war? No, we know how the war ended. So we must focus on the losses on both sides, but that is not the whole point. So, contextualize this discussion by saying we got so much. And
I'll just jump in here to say, I agree with you completely, Group Captain Ahlawat. On NDTV, if you've seen our coverage, very little of it has actually been about those losses. We've had very, very zoomed out coverage of the overall aspects. In fact, Vishnu is the journalist who first accessed those images that have become representative of what the Indian Air Force actually achieved. But the fact is, narrative traps aside, the claims versus counterclaims aside, there are layers to what we are breaking today. There is duplicity, from the United States. There is subterfuge from Pakistan that has attempted to paint itself as a country that was not damaged a lot. You've got the Indian Air Force Chief, no less, categorically putting numbers to the damage that was actually inflicted. So I think what Vishnu's newsbreak today does is add only another layer to this. We've got nothing to be defensive about, right, as far as what we achieved in Operation Sindoor. And that's the reason why a specific and conspicuous denial of information from the United States, in my view, is like this global alarm bell. They've never refused this kind of information before when it has suited them. And that's why it sits out there like a really big geopolitical sore thumb. General Dhillon, you want to come in on this?
Yeah, Shiv, actually speaking, in 2019, they could make a statement and, we had no other way to sort of confirm it. But given like I said earlier, given the transparency which exists today, and given the intelligence systems and the, other aspects which are available today, we can zoom into that hole also which is made in that hangar.
Yep.
So that is the reason the US found it convenient and, probably better not to accept or deny and just deflect. Because they knew sooner or later the details of the damage would come out and would come out in concrete evidence. And again, I think Vishnu has done a wonderful job, NDTV has done a wonderful job, and their narrative fell flat. And in addition to this, like I always say, I said it on the channel earlier, the war was being fought between India and Pakistan, but narratives are being fought elsewhere. The narrative was the Russian, Indian, and French systems are not good enough as compared to Chinese, Turkish, or Western Bloc systems, because there's a big defense market which would tilt if they were to say that Russian S-400s and Indian BrahMos and Rafales and everything, they did so much damage. So narrative war is much, much bigger and much, much expensive stakes. So that's how this is being fought. But this time, I think your queries, they just couldn't deny.
Vishnu, the destruction of those F-16s is also important because of the, of the kind of aura of invincibility that you touched upon, that the F-16s have enjoyed, because the Pakistanis have pretended like they can't be shot down. The Americans have never confirmed any kills in the past. This time they've diverted your query to Pakistan, which, as you rightly said, is never going to confirm anything of this kind, because the F-16 is such a prized asset for both Pakistan and in the United States, even though it is a platform.
Somebody must have been laughing, Shiv, when they said, tell Vishnu to go ask Pakistan, knowing fully well that that ain't going to happen. Right? And imagine if Pakistan were to confirm to me if I asked them.
I hope you've sent them an email though, Vishnu. I hope you've sent the Pakistan Defense Ministry and the Air Force
just to get their denial, right?
Just to get their denial. Or maybe they'll ask you to check with the Pentagon. But but on a serious note, Vishnu, the Air Force Chief, the Indian Air Force Chief, talked about knocking out some of these aircraft, both in the air and on the ground. Now, we've got some, graphics showing you where roughly these hits may have actually happened. Can you throw some more light on that? You've shown us those pictures of the Jacobabad air base where some of these were knocked out.
Sure.
We do know that S-400s may have also been in play.
Well, there were a couple of important points that the Indian Air Force Chief did mention. He mentioned that the reason the Akash surface-to-air missile system, or the MR-SAM, which is an Israeli-based system, didn't actually come into play against fighter aircraft, they came into play against drones and other weapon systems, was because the S-400 was enough of a deterrent against the Pakistani aircraft. What he went on to say is that 5 fighter aircraft were knocked down by the S-400, and a 6th one, possibly an AWACS aircraft or an ELINT, or an electronic intelligence platform, was knocked out as well. Now, we do know, and this has happened in the Ukraine war in the last couple of months, if not a year or so, that F-16s have been knocked out over the skies. Ukrainian F-16s have been knocked out over the skies of Ukraine by Russian S-400s. This is an extremely robust system which has a very advanced ECCM capability, electronic countermeasure system. When aircraft are deployed in combat, they're often deployed with jammers. They are often deployed with a system to ensure that incoming surface-to-air missiles or air-to-air missiles are not able to lock onto their target. However, the S-400 is advanced enough to actually recognize a threat when it sees it, lock onto that target, and engage that target. It is interesting to me that the Indian Air Force Chief didn't identify which fighters were actually knocked out. That, I think, would have been done because of reasons of secrecy. They don't want the Pakistanis to know what signatures of which aircraft we have. The Pakistanis would know. We would certainly have the signature. We would have mapped the digital and radar signature of F-16s, not least of all because we train with F-16s from various countries, including the US, all the time. But they may not want the Pakistanis, for example, to know about how much we know about their J-10s or JF-17 Thunders. That's my sense.
Tom Cooper, one of the world's foremost aerial warfare analysts and historians, spoke to me just a couple of days ago, right after the Indian Air Force Chief had spoken. And he said that the Indian Air Force Chief's words have validated everything that he thought of. He had a whole picture in his head that he said really sort of came to life after what the Air Chief said. And I can't wait to see what he thinks of what Vishnu's news break here on NDTV actually means as well. I want to play out for you a very telling little excerpt of what Tom Cooper told me on the F-16 kills. Take a look at this. The Indian Air Force Chief in his speech also mentioned the F-16 once or twice. It's the only fighter type he actually identified. We do know that Pakistan operates a handful of different fighter types, not just the F-16. There's the J-10, there's the JF-17, a couple of Mirage types as well.
Yes.
Do you have a view or an assessment from everything you've seen, acknowledging that there's a great deal of fog, of what the Pakistan Air Force may have lost? The Indian Air Force chief said that at least a few F-16s were knocked out both in the air and on the ground.
Well, from what I know, this is really sketchy, because I know about specific engagements which are pointing in direction of Pakistani Air Force kind of specializing its units and deploying them only for specific purposes. So F-16s, you have squadrons which are specialized in air-to-air, and you have squadrons, or at least parts of squadrons, which are specialized for air-to-ground operations. And in the case of JF-17s, they are mostly actually specialized in ground attack, and J-10s mostly for air-to-air. So, it depends on what situation, on which specific engagement are we talking about. I said I think it was on 8th of May. Sorry if I don't recall all the details precisely, because I'm currently going through all of this and reviewing it, but it's going to take some time because I'm all the time receiving new details. So point is this, in the Pathankot sector, there was a combined strike, probably including F-16s, probably escorted by J-10s. I all the time have to say probably, because this is not so that as if you have models on a fashion show in Paris, but all these operations were undertaken from very long ranges, from ranges of at least 40-50 kilometers, and through 8th of May alone, the fact that Pakistanis stopped trying to close to less than 40 kilometers from the Indian border is speaking its clear language. It says something has happened to them at that point, because they couldn't get closer to the border without facing a clear threat of being targeted, and not only targeted but shot down as well. That's why I'm quite convinced that one or two F-16s have been shot down opposite on the Pakistani side, opposite to Pathankot, for example.
And for what it's worth, Vishnu and I will be reaching out to the Pakistan government and asking them, for information about the F-16s that they've lost, because the US State Department has explicitly said, please divert your queries to the Pakistan government. But please remember, and I don't mean this non-seriously, this is a country where their defense minister literally said that he'd heard about aircraft losses on social media. So I will leave that there for just this moment.